Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the new Nano HDZero camera, which is a nano-size camera for the HDZero or Byte digital FPV system. I think this camera maybe came as a bit of a surprise to some of us, so we had seen it teased online once or twice, but I know personally I was pretty surprised to see HDZero release a new camera so soon after the micro camera. But it's pretty exciting to see, and I've been testing one for a few days, so I'd like to give you an overview of the camera and talk about its features, and then I'll show you some flight footage and give you my thoughts. Let's start with a physical overview of the camera. You'll notice that this camera looks pretty similar to the micro HDZero camera, and it was created in a similar way, so Runcam manufactured it for the HDZero brand. It has the same black casing as the micro camera and the same back cover to secure the MIPI cable. This is also a good time to mention that this camera doesn't come with a MIPI cable, so when you buy the camera, make sure you buy a MIPI cable or make sure you already have one you can use. But it looks pretty similar to that camera. You know, obviously this is a nano-size camera rather than a micro camera. So it is 14 millimeters wide, which is the same dimensions as a normal nano camera, but unusually it is a little bit taller than most nano cameras. So it's about 16 millimeters tall, and that is something that you should be aware of. Now you're probably not going to have any problems fitting this into your build. Most canopies are made to support a 14 millimeter camera, so that's going to work just fine. But if your canopy or frame is really tight on vertical space, then maybe that 2 millimeters is a problem. So it's just something to be aware of. This camera uses an M8 lens, which is the same as the previous nano cameras, which is good because it means that it's about the same dimensions, it's about the same distance between the mounting screws and the edge of the lens, so you won't have that problem that some people had on the micro camera where they mounted it in their frame and then they could see the standoffs on the edge of the image. If your previous cameras worked, you're going to be able to use this one just fine. Weight is pretty similar to the other nano cameras, although it is slightly heavier. So on my scale, this camera is 4.3 grams, whereas the previous Runcam Nano HD was 4.1 grams. Now I know some people really care about every gram on their Whoop builds, and weight really does matter on drones that small, but I think that you're going to find this extra 0.2 grams is well worth it in terms of the increased performance. And that's a good segue into talking about what sets this nano camera apart from the previous nano cameras that we've had. So the Nano HDZero camera actually uses the same sensor that's in the micro HDZero camera, and that's something that I was really excited about. So you guys might remember I tested the micro HDZero camera a while back, and I was really impressed with the quality I got from that camera. It just seemed like it performed really well, and the image blew away the previous nano cameras. But it's a micro-sized camera, and for me, a lot of what I fly is whoops and micro drones, and they don't fit cameras that large, and so it wasn't really a realistic option for a lot of what I fly. I just kind of felt like I had to deal with having this slightly worse image in order to have a build this small. But this nano camera kind of changes that, so now we can get that better sensor in the smaller package and at a lighter weight. And now it's a realistic option for these small little drones. So I think that that's something that could be really exciting for us. Now I will say that, this camera uses the M8 lens, so it's the smaller lens. And so we need to temper our expectations a bit. It's probably not going to look quite as good as the micro HDZero camera because the lens really does play a big part in the quality of what we see out of a camera. A lot of you guys have seen that because I know I've seen people online swapping out these lenses with different lenses and you get better performance or different performance. So that's something to be aware of. We're going to take a look at it soon. But I'm really excited about having this new sensor in the camera, and I think it's going to make a big difference. Because it's the same sensor, really a lot of the internals of this camera are very similar to the micro HDZero, and that means that we also get the same settings menu that the micro HDZero camera had. So you can see that I can pull up these settings and I'm getting the same type of things. I can set the brightness and the sharpness and the saturation. These settings seem like they work about the same as they did on the micro camera. You definitely get a very different image between the different saturation levels. I'm going to be showing you some flight footage where I mess with some of those settings so you can get an idea of what that looks like. Like I've said in the past, I really would eventually like to see more settings on this menu, but I'm really happy to be able to adjust the settings at all, and I find that they do make a big difference in the image, so I'm glad that that option is there. You can't flip the camera with these settings like you could in the previous nano cameras. I actually really liked having that option because I would often install my cameras upside down on accident, and so it was nice to be able to flip it over and fix that. But with this one, you don't have that option, so just make sure you install the camera right side up. So I think that's going to do it for talking about these features. I know that what you guys really want to see is flight footage, so we're going to go ahead and jump into that, and I'm going to show you some flights. So like I said, I've been testing this camera for a little while, and I installed the new Nano HDZero camera in this 85mm whoop and did as much flying as I could over the past few days. Now, where I live, the weather's starting to get a little bit colder and a little bit worse, so I wasn't able to fly it in quite as many conditions as I would have liked, but I think you're still going to be able to get a pretty good idea of what this camera is capable of. I'm going to also be showing you some comparisons between this camera and other cameras, and mostly what I'm going to be comparing against is the Runcam Nano HD. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I think that that's the best competition for this camera right now. You know, it doesn't really make sense for us to compare it to the Micro HDZero camera because either your build is micro camera sized or it's nano camera sized, and you know, that's not a decision that most people are making. The Runcam Nano HD, in my opinion, was the previous best nano camera for this system, and so I thought it made sense to compare that to this camera. So I'm going to go ahead and start rolling some of that flight footage and give you my thoughts as we take a look at it. We're going to start with some normal daytime flying, and the first thing that I want to point out is that the dynamic range of this camera really sets it apart from the other nano cameras. You'll notice that as I fly around, the sky isn't blown out even though it's sunny outside, and I can still see the shadows really well in the darker areas, and there's nothing in this image that I can't see. And that's something that I think is a big improvement and something that's going to make this camera much easier to fly with. Overall, the image is much more even and pleasing to look at, and I think that the reason that matters is not only because it looks cool, but I think that it also makes you less fatigued while you're flying. So I think sometimes whenever we fly with some of the other cameras, you know, you spend a lot of time looking at this really bright spot in the image, or you're trying to strain to see into the darker areas, and even if you don't realize it, that makes you tired while you fly, and it kind of limits how long you can fly with those cameras for. And I feel like I'm not as likely to get fatigued and tired as I fly with this camera. It's much easier to see where I'm going, I don't have to focus quite as much, it's just a very nice image. When I flew this camera in a larger area, I noticed that it doesn't have too much of that fisheye distortion effect that we often see on cameras. Now, it does have a little bit of that. That's the price we pay for using a wide angle lens on a sensor this small, but it really looks pretty good, and I'm not seeing too much of that distortion, so I was happy about that as well. One negative thing is that I did notice a little bit of sensor noise on this camera, so as I fly, you can see in some of the darker areas, there's a little bit of that colored ISO noise. That is something that I actually noticed in my goggles as I was flying, but it's really not distracting, and honestly, I think the only reason I'm able to see it is because the rest of the image is so clear that I can finally start focusing on some of those nitpicky details. So I think it's actually, you know, impressive that we're getting to the point that we can start to notice things like that, but that is something I noticed. While we're flying during the day, let's go ahead and change some of the camera settings so you can get an idea of what those do. The first thing I changed was the saturation, so I set it on high and did some flying around with that. And these colors can be a bit much. I mean, it's definitely high saturation. I know some people don't like that. I kind of like the look. I mean, to me, it makes me feel like I'm flying in a video game or something like that. And I mean, I just enjoy seeing a little bit more color in the world, so I enjoy having that. But this is why it's great to have a setting. You can decide if that's something you want, or if you'd rather stick with the regular or even the low saturation setting. I also tried using both the high saturation and enhanced sharpness setting. I know that's something I've seen some people say online, that it makes the DVR footage look better, so I thought it'd be interesting to try. I can definitely tell that these edges are sharper, but personally, I don't really like the way this looks, and to me it looks a little bit fake. So I think that this is something that I personally associate with cheaper cameras. They often will enhance the sharpness to make the resolution look higher, and I just think it doesn't really look natural or real, so I don't prefer it. But I can see how it could be useful if you really need to see as much of those edges as you can. So maybe if you're doing racing or some type of technical flying where you really need to be able to discern the edges of objects, it could be helpful there. Or maybe you just like the way it looks. Either way, it's nice that we have the setting, and you can set that however you want to make the image look the way you want it to look. Finally, I wanted to see how this camera performed at night. Now, I know not everyone flies at night, but personally it's something that I'm really into, and I was curious to see how this camera would stack up against the other nano cameras in the HDZero system. I was really impressed previously when I tested the Micro HDZero camera, and I thought it'd be interesting to see if putting that same sensor in this smaller camera would still have that same performance. And I was impressed to see that it really does blow those other nano cameras away in terms of night performance. Notice that although I can kind of see where I'm going with the Runcam Nano HD in the dark, the new Nano HDZero camera is just so much better, and I can see so much farther. I actually get some color in the image, and this is just a much better picture for flying in the dark. Now, you do still get some color ISO noise. It's definitely not a perfect, beautiful image, but what's important to me in this environment is that I'm able to see where I'm going, and I can see obstacles well before I'm on top of them. And like I said, it's just so much of a better image. If you're flying in the dark or at night, this is definitely the camera you want. And I'll mention too that, even if you don't fly outside at night, if you're flying whoops, if you're flying things that use nano cameras, there's a decent chance you do some flying indoors. And a lot of these same things are going to apply to indoor flying. So with this camera, I think you'd be able to fly into a dark room and still see where you're going, which is not necessarily something you can say for the previous nano cameras. I'll also do a quick field of view comparison for you against the Runcam Nano HD. Now, I know a lot of you guys are really looking forward to getting a 4x3 sensor camera, and unfortunately this one is still 16:9, but I did want you to be able to see that field of view and how it compares. To my eyes, it looks like the vertical field of view is nearly identical to the Runcam Nano HD, and the horizontals also about the same, or maybe a little bit wider than the Runcam Nano HD. So pretty good results here. I know we all want more field of view, but I was happy to see that it compared pretty much exactly with the Runcam Nano HD. Now that you've had a chance to look at some flight footage, let me give you my overall thoughts on this camera. Honestly, I think this camera is going to be the new standard for nano-sized HDZero builds. Compared to the Runcam Nano HD and the Foxeer Digisight 2, I just felt like everything about this camera was better. The image is more evenly lit and pleasing to look at, and when I fly around in any lighting situation, I feel like I can see where I'm going better, and I'm just getting a better image that I'm much happier with. They basically took the things that we liked about that micro HDZero camera and they shrunk it down to fit into this nano-size casing. And now I can use that on builds that are, small whoops and lightweight builds. And I mean, it's great. I'm just really happy that we actually have, a miniaturized version of this, and we were able to keep most of the performance from that larger camera. It's really great to see. I also think we're going to see much better availability of this camera. I know that's a problem that a lot of people had with the micro HDZero cameras, that they wanted one but had trouble ordering it, or their camera got stuck in customs or whatever. But I think that with this camera, we're going to see it at a lot more resellers, and most of the places that are carrying the Race 2 VTX from HDZero are going to carry this camera as well. So it should be a lot easier to get a hold of than those previous cameras, and that's something that's going to be good, because I think you're going to want this camera. So with all that, why wouldn't you choose this camera? Well, there's only a few reasons. So the first could be the weird sizing. It's 14 millimeters wide, but it is 16 millimeters tall. So if for some reason you have a build where it really has to be exactly 14 by 14, then maybe that's a problem for you, and maybe that's something that would keep you away. I don't think that's going to be an issue for most people, but it could happen. It is 0.2 grams heavier than the Runcam Nano HD, so if that's a deal breaker for you, then you probably need to stick with the previous camera. Again, something you're going to have to decide. And then finally, it does have fewer settings than the Runcam Nano HD. So you only get the brightness, sharpness, and saturation settings on this camera, and that is a lot fewer settings than you get on the Runcam Nano HD. In my opinion, the image from this Nano HDZero camera just looks so much better than the Runcam Nano HD that even if I just used default settings on this camera, I think it would look better than anything I could get from the Runcam Nano HD with tweaking the settings. But if you're a person who likes to change those settings, or if there's some specific setting on that camera that you're not seeing on this Nano HDZero, maybe that's a reason to not get it. I'm not sure. Like I said though, I'm really excited about this camera. This is the camera I want to put in all of my whoops, and I think that a lot of you guys are going to feel the same way. So guys, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this look at the new Nano HDZero camera. I know I'm really excited about it, and I think a lot of you guys are going to want it as well. So I'm going to put some links below to some of the resellers that are stocking the camera. Definitely go check that out if you're interested. Don't forget to get a MIPI cable too. And normally I think I'd end one of these videos by asking you to subscribe or to like the video, but I want to do something a little bit different today. I actually wanted to thank all of you guys who have been watching my videos and who are already subscribed to the channel. I really enjoy making these videos. It's something that I find to be a lot of fun, and your support and your comments and all that really do help, and they really do make it easier to make these videos and make me want to keep making these videos. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for all the kind comments that you guys have left on these videos. I really do appreciate that. Anyway, that's gonna do it. Definitely look for more videos soon. There is a lot of exciting stuff happening in digital FPV, and I'm hoping to be able to cover more of it throughout the rest of this year and next year, so stay tuned for that. But otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.